So it's a really nice evening. Unfortunately the wind is quite strong and I'm at the coast, so I hope that doesn't get picked up too much in the audio. But I've come out tonight in the hope of capturing one image. I really just want to get a nice image as the light gets even better as the evening progresses. I've also come out to talk about the filters I use when I'm doing landscape photography. I've had a couple of queries in the last week, people asking me the exact specifics of the filters that I carry, so I want to cover that in this video. And I also thought it would be interesting to add in the reasons that I choose to use ND graduated filters. It's quite a controversial topic, you could say, in photography. Some people carry them, other people say you don't need them. So I want to give my thoughts on that and give my reasons behind why I choose to use them. But anyway, the first thing to do is head off and try and find a composition that's going to work as the evening progresses. So I found a few possible compositions in this area, but if they work or not later on in about an hour's time really depends on what happens with the sun. There's some cloud cover in the sky, although it's fairly broken up at areas, and also the tide is going out and that will affect how my possible compositions look. So we'll need to tackle that later, but first let's talk about filters. So first of all, which make of filters do I use? Well, I use leaf filters, and to be clear, every item of photography equipment that I own, be it filters, cameras, whatever, at this point in time I've purchased myself. I'm not sponsored by anyone, I'm not paid by anyone, and I've never been given any free items. So to be clear, I've bought them all with my own money. And why did I choose leaf filters? Well, I have tried the filters from a few other companies as well, and I just find Lee the best quality overall. In terms of optical quality, I find their filters really good. They don't really have an effect on my image quality that I can see unless you really look closely and you stack quite a few filters together at once. Then obviously you will see some effect, but if you're just using one filter, sometimes two, there's not really much effect on the images. In terms of the holder, I really like the holder. Other companies' holders I didn't like. They were too time consuming. I didn't like their design. I just quite like the quality and simple use of the Lee filter holder. Also other companies, ND Grads, I've seen a colour cast in those. I don't get that with the Lee filters. So I really like them, and that's the reason I've chosen to use them. So what actual filters do I carry? Well, I'll start with the two most important types in my opinion in order of importance. The first is the Polarizer. That's a fantastic filter. I use it for a number of reasons. It takes the shine and the glare off certain surfaces. So if you've got quite clear water with a shine on top, you can remove that shine, the glare, and see what's underneath. If the water's really dark, you can sometimes make it even darker with the use of the Polarizer. It's great for saturation of colour. In terms of a typical summer's day with a blue sky, you can really emphasise the blues and bring out the clouds, make them really pop in the sky. I also use it in the woodland for taking any shine of foliage. You may not think you get that, but you can at times, especially with wet foliage. And that really just reveals the true colours and saturates them. So lots of different uses for the Polarizer. I really like it, and it's probably the most important filter. Then moving on to your standard neutral density filters, I carry the Lee Little Stopper, which stops 6 stops of light getting into your lens, and I also carry the Lee Big Stopper, which stops 10 stops of light getting into your lens. I carry those for creative reasons. Sometimes when I'm taking a particular image, I want to smooth out the movement of the water. If there's water in it, I want to smooth out cloud movement and give things a sort of ethereal or dreamy type look. Which filter you use really depends on what you're wanting to achieve, the time of day you're shooting, how bright it is, and just the length of exposure you want for a particular image. So those are the two most important types of filter, and that's the ones that I carry. It's worth pointing out that the Lee Big Stopper and to a far lesser extent the Lee Little Stopper do have a slight blue colour cast to them, a slight cold colour cast, and it's something that's very easy to get rid of in post-production if you want to do so, but personally I quite like to leave it in a lot of my images because I'm sort of visualising that as I take them and I quite like the look of it. But it's something to bear in mind. And Lee have recently in the last few months taken out a new set of ND filters which are more expensive, but they're completely colour neutral, no cast, so you can always get those if you wish to do so. So now on to a more controversial topic, and that is ND graduated filters and whether or not you need to have them, where you need to buy them, or whether you can do everything in software. There's two sides to this. Some people say it's better to use them, get everything right in camera. The other people say they're a waste of time and money and you can take multiple exposures and fix everything in post-production in Photoshop or whatever software you use. Or indeed that modern cameras, or some of them, are so good you can capture everything in one shot. So I'll first of all tell you what I carry in terms of ND graduated filters. I certainly use them, and then I'll talk about the reasons why I've chosen to carry them. So in terms of the actual ND graduated filters that I carry 4, and I've got a 0.6 ND medium grad, I've got a 0.9 ND hard grad, a 0.9 ND soft grad, and a 1.2 ND medium grad. And those are the 4 that I carry. They seem to cover most situations that I come across. Whether or not you need any filters at all, or even need to blend exposures or whatever, it really depends on what you're shooting, the lighting conditions, the time of day and so on. But for me, I've used all those filters multiple times. I found them really handy, and I'll talk about why I actually use them. So the first thing I think I'd like to cover is, do I think you should use ND grads, or do I think you should be able to capture everything in your camera or use multiple exposures and then blend them together later in software? Well, to be perfectly honest, I think you'll get the best results over years of photography if you do both options. I think there's situations that will work better if you use ND grads, and I think there's definitely situations that will work better if you use bracketing or taking multiple exposures and then blending them later in post-production. Now, since I'm at the coast, let's give one simple example where I think the software and multiple exposure approach would work better. If you can visualize being inside a cave, and the cave opening is 10 feet wide, and you're inside the cave wanting to capture the look out of the cave but also some of the cave around the opening, so you've got very dark interior all around the opening of the cave. That's a situation where ND grads wouldn't work too well. They would be darkening the inside of the cave as well, and you don't want that. So there I would take 2 exposures, one for the interior of the cave, get that exposed the way I want, and then a second exposure to capture the window of light, the outside of the cave, and get the detail in the sky or whatever's outside. So in a situation like that, I definitely think bracketing or taking 2 exposures manually, however you do it, will work best. And then there are other situations where I definitely think ND grads work far better than taking multiple exposures. So there's probably 2 main reasons that I use ND graduated filters, and the first one is that I like to have the assurance that when I'm on location I've captured everything correct in camera and I'm not leaving anything to chance when I get home having to use post-production to fix issues with exposure. Now, it also saves time. Obviously, if you're taking a lot of images, it's quite fun editing them, seeing your image take shape. However, if you're taking a lot of images and if you're blending exposures, etc., all that time can add up. Now, I know you can get really good at this and reduce the time it takes and so on, but some people may frown at this, but I far prefer being out taking images than spending time editing. It's probably something people hear a lot, but for me it genuinely is true. The other thing is the assurance of knowing you've captured the image correctly. My camera's got great dynamic range, as do many modern cameras, and there's been times where I felt I should be able to capture everything in one exposure, and when I've went home I've started to reduce the highlights, etc., just to get the sky right, get the detail right. And some issues with that image have arisen. It's affected the image quality. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does at times. So if I can use my ND grads, get the sky or the brighter areas the way I want them on location, one, it's safety. I know I've got the image right and no issues can arise in post-production. And two, it really saves me time in editing, especially if I'm taking lots of images. So the battery just died in my vlogging camera, so if the composition has changed you'll know why I had to go and change the battery. But on to the second reason why I think it's very important for me personally to use ND grads. When I'm out taking landscape images, it's often in very strong wind conditions, so there can be a lot of movement at times between multiple exposures. So for example, if I was taking a scene, you can imagine there's some sky, clouds could be moving, there could be trees, bushes, other foliage moving in strong winds. The same in lower areas of the image, and you're trying to take multiple exposures. Things won't line up. Now, you can try your best to fix that in something like Photoshop. You could try cloning tools, healing, filling areas, etc. But I really don't like doing that. In my opinion, and it's just my opinion, it makes the image slightly false. I like to capture actual representations of what I saw at the time, and I feel if I go home and images, multiple exposures don't line up and I have to start faking things, in my opinion it's producing a fake image. As I said earlier, I don't object to using multiple exposures where you have to, like I talked about the scenario from shooting out from inside a cave. That's perfectly fine, that's fantastic use of it. Other times it is focus stacking, you will obviously have to take multiple exposures then. But in terms of for working with exposure, I prefer to get it right in camera, not have to do any post-production work. It saves me time, and also in very strong wind conditions it's next to impossible without making the image fake, in my opinion. I don't mind using those tools where I have to. For example, if I took a landscape and there was something in it I didn't notice at the time, like a piece of rubbish, it's man-made, it won't be there in a few hours time, or I remove it myself after I take the image. I don't mind using Photoshop at all to get rid of things like that, but in wind conditions, strong wind conditions, things have moved between exposures. I'm not a fan of using those tools to fix things like that. I really like capturing things in one exposure, and I feel I've captured a genuine moment in time if I can do that. Now obviously if I'm out in the field I can still get creative, but I choose to do my creative touches, if you like, on location in camera. For example, I'll use filters. I may use a polarizer, I may use an ND filter, I may adjust my aperture, my shutter speed and so on to try and create visual effects. For example, if I do a long exposure and smooth out water, obviously that's not how the scene looks to me as I take it, but it's a creative choice and it's still captured in one exposure in my camera. I don't like relying on software too much to use to create effects rather. So that's just my opinion. That's why I use ND grads. I think they improve the quality of my images. I think they let me capture better, more genuine moments in time. And it's just a personal thing. It's totally up to the individual whether or not they use them, but as I spoke about earlier and sum up this discussion, I think it's best if you've got both options. You can use ND grads appropriately, or you can use bracketing or multiple exposures properly in the situations that suit both choices. So are there any downsides to using ND grads or indeed filters in general? Well, of course there are probably quite a few, but I choose to accept those, I guess, because I feel I get the benefits from them. But they are of course quite expensive to buy if you're buying a lot of them. They're extra weight for you to carry, they take up extra room in your camera bag, they're extra pieces of photography equipment you need to keep clean, and you can be more prone to getting some flare with certain filters as well. So these are all issues you've got to consider. But hopefully hearing my thoughts on this topic, the topic of filters, the topic of whether or not you need ND grads, has been useful. Of course, the dynamic range in cameras is getting better all the time, and there may genuinely be a point in time where we don't need ND grads, but at this point in time I still think we need them, and I feel I get benefits from having them over always relying on taking multiple exposures. But just my opinion, I think there's really a place for both. As I spoke about earlier, I talked about the scenario in a cave as one example. There are more I can think of, but I talked about that scenario where taking multiple exposures is the best route, and I've talked about other scenarios where using ND grads is the best route in my opinion. So hopefully you found it useful. But the sun is rapidly setting and it's behind some clouds at the moment, so I'm not sure if I'm going to get a shot tonight, but I'm going to have a look anyway and see if I can find something. So it's now very dark, as you can see, so the video quality may not be up to much in this ending section of the video, but the reason I'm hanging around so late is that I've seen this very interesting shape of rocks just here, which you may make out in the video. And I've been waiting until the sun set to get some nice colour in the sky, and my intention is to make these rocks quite dark, not revealing very much detail in them, so almost like they're a silhouette. And I think it may look quite nice, but we'll need to see this one edited as usual. But I think it's going to be quite nice, and because the topic of the video has been about filters, don't particularly need to use any here because I'm not really wanting a lot of detail brought out in the darker areas. That's my intention anyway. So they're going to be quite dark, and then we've got the nice colour in the sky in the distance as the sun sets. That's my intention for this image. Just the shape of the rocks drew my attention to it. I saw quite a few interesting compositions in the way over when there was more light, but the tide had went out and the rocks were extremely treacherous, so I think safety came first. There was no point going for those, but I really like the look of this shape, and I'm hoping by making them like a silhouette almost, they really stand out and give an atmospheric type shot. But I've spoke a lot in this video, not did a lot of photography, but it's more a video about filters. However, I know people like to see images, so earlier today I was framing some of my images for customers, and all of those images are using some type of leaf filter in them, be it Polarizer or an ND grad or whatever. So I'll show you those images on screen to finish the video, and I'll also show you the finished results framed. But I hope you've enjoyed watching, found it quite interesting listening to my thoughts on filters, and I'll hopefully see you in my next video. I'm going to end this video by announcing a couple of competition winners. I recently run a giveaway offering 2 winners their choice of A4 print from a number of images I featured in a specific video. To win, you had to name the image you like to receive and also say where in your home you would display the image after you had it framed. I printed out all the entries that met the requirements and I got someone to pick 2. So the winners are Terry Farrell and Raymond O'Toole. Could you both make contact with me via my website contact page? The link for that is in the description of this video. If you send me your details for shipping the prints, then leave a comment in this video to say you've done that, I will get them sent off to you both. Well done, and I hope you like them.